I often say when I'm quoting bits of the Bible at people, I often say to them, you don't have to believe, you don't have to be a Christian or a Jew or a Catholic or whatever it is, but tell me why this isn't helpful to us, even as a secular manual. If you take away all belief and faith in God out of it, the stories, the Proverbs, a manual for living that the Proverbs is called, why are we turning our way on what is essentially, possibly, I mean, I think Cain and Abel's, they think it's probably a 40,000-year-old story, that we have this repository of knowledge and these ideas of forgiveness and repentance that are actually really equitable ideas, which is what's so wonderful. Why have we shunned it and thrown it all away? But we're still so hungry and thirsty for that religious fervor that people have. And at the end of the day, we've just replaced it with a brand new religion, but it lacks salvation, it lacks repentance, and it lacks forgiveness. So, but it has all the same qualities. You're kneeling, you're reciting, pledges, and you've got the white privilege being the original sin, and it's a religion, but much more. It's more a cult, I think, actually, and almost a death cult, wrapped up as a very compassionate thing. It's almost a race to the top of wokeness, in the same way it's probably a race to the top in ISIS is how many heads you can cut off and how many suicide bombers you can sort out. It's like you can never be too woke. Whereas in Christianity, the idea of the fact that you are fallen and there is original sin, and that you can through your life and with God's guidance, have a positive influence on this planet. There is wokeness has none of this. Wokeness is religion without hope, and it's therefore horrible, terrifying actually as well, because you look at how violent they are and how intolerant they are of anybody else's thought. So it is like an extremist cult. And it could morph, and it sort of is morphing slightly in America into, what is Antifa, which becomes, it becomes violent and murderous.
So instead of loving your neighbour, we now have a nice line in hate for anybody who disagrees with us, rather than doing unto others as we'd have them do unto us. We seem intent upon, you used the word earlier, regression to a more violent age where we will just not suffer those who have a different perspective. There's no concept of a shared humanity, much more a concept of a part of humanity that deserves elevation and a large part of humanity that is unconscionable and only deserving of contempt. It's very hard to see any hope in wokeness.
Oh yeah, I don't think it's about hope. I think it's about righteousness. And one of the great things of Christian teaching about the fact that we are sinners is that it keeps a good eye on your ego. And if the only sin, if I don't think within a woke person, if that's what we'll loosely call them, that there is any concept of sin within them. There is any concept of the fact that there may be their intentions and motivations may be flawed in some way. I think they think the total opposite. I think they're looking everywhere but inside themselves for the problems that need to be cured and rectified by their own unutterably inconsistent self-righteousness.
Yeah, that question of pride, I think it was C.S. Lewis who said that if you're self-obsessed, lost in pride, it's impossible for you to look upwards and see something greater than yourself, and it's impossible to look out and see other people because you're looking down on them. And that pride lies at the heart of every human failing. I thought it was an interesting insight from, I dare say, another Briton who would be regarded today, despite his enormous standing in Britain in the 20th century. And there was a man that the BBC reeled out to promote and build morale during the darkest days of the fight against fascism in Europe. But he would be regarded by the woke, I suppose, as part of the problem, rather than somebody that helped lift Britain. It's very sad, this complete rewriting of history. But another aspect of heritage, British heritage, that you've spoken of, you've said that British heritage is steeped in the innate values, I'm quoting, of families and communities, what perhaps Edmund Burke would have called the little platoons. How can cancel and woke culture be addressed at the family level? You've touched on this, but I'd like to almost, if you like, go back there because of children. I mean, I think from what I know of you and listening to your talk, you've got children. You're very, very committed to them and to doing everything you can to try and not only raise them the right way and instill in them a sense of proportion, of balance, of hope, of perspective, of modesty, but to do what you can to create a better society for them, or at least try and hold back some of the worst excesses. How do you think people now help their children? You've touched on the dinner table, but this needs to be part of it. I think the first thing is we've got to say to parents, don't outsource the raising of your children to the state, because the state's got very hungry with all of its apparatchiks in the media and in academia to tell your children who they should be and how they should behave. Parents, I think, have the greater responsibility there. How do we rebuild that, do you think, Laurence?
I think give them the confidence to do that is probably the most important thing, and some tools. So for me, certainly, the way I deal with my own children is I say to them, I don't mind what you think at all, but you just have to explain to me why you think it. And you teach them the ability to think critically, and then you teach them the responsibilities of being unclear in their thoughts. So if one of my kids says something not very bright, or he hasn't thought it through very well, my dad, for example, or my brothers he'll be told. It's to toughen them a little as well, and to not celebrate this victimization that exists in children. So the more a child suffers, the more one needs to pay attention to them. It's to remind children that the best things that happen in your life will come about from a series of situations, not all of them pleasant, and that life can be very, very difficult for you. And I think then again, rallying around the idea of a shared culture. So not working on this idea of multiculturalism, which in my view is an absolutely failed experiment in England, in the UK certainly, and it was forced upon us. And we, again, those of us that wanted to maintain and celebrate what we felt were British values were told that we were all racists. So it's to return to an idea that we are British. What are the things that the British stand for? And then that also has a double effect of making your skin color irrelevant.
You raise this very interesting distinction, and I think it's an incredibly important one. The conflating of racism and culture. It's a complete absurdity, really. The most cursory consideration of the fact that belief systems have nothing to do with race will tell you that racism and culture are not the same. But there has been, as you say, this race to conflate the two and to call people a racist if they want to defend their own culture, which seems absurd to me, because the very reason that so many people have wanted to come to free, open, democratic societies, which have deep cultural roots in what might be called the idea of the rule of law, that in itself is something that comes from the idea, I think, of a Christian thinking that nobody should be above the law, nobody should be below it. We all have unique value. Why have we allowed this idea to take hold that somehow if you have a doubt about multiculturalism, you're a racist? It seems to me to be intellectually dishonest and utterly morally bankrupt, and in the end, very self-defeating.
Well, I think it's in the same way as wokeism is a virus. What it does is it attacks the weakest part of the cell, and the weakest part of our Western democratic cell is our compassion. So if someone tells us that we're racist, we will go, oh, sorry, what can we do to solve that problem? Much before we will have an intellectual discussion with them about whether that's true or not. So I think it exploits our generous and open humanity. But I do think the pushback against it now is quite strong. There are people that are starting to stand up against it, but it doesn't prevent the media are all in cahoots with it as well. As I said to you, them not broadcasting this show that I did. Well, this example of a very tolerant, kind, empathetic left-winger screamed racist at me for an hour on television. It's insane. I don't know what we can do about it other than the more people that stand up, the better. I mean, we've had 20,000 join, register their interest in Reclaim in just over 2 weeks. So that's a huge number. And I think you've just got to take the message out there to people, give them the alternative and say it's not racist. And I say it to people frequently. I was walking through the mall in Camberwell the other day, and this old lady with black skin came out of the shop and she grabbed me by the cheeks and she went, "You're for me, you speak for me." And I just thought, there you go. All people want to do is have the right to an opinion. And when we're fighting for the right to an opinion, you know your culture is in trouble. Your culture cannot be driven by narrative. Your culture must be driven by reality. Realities change. Several decades ago, you could be chemically castrated for being gay, and now we celebrate equal sex marriages, same-sex marriages in our culture. But the narrative is starting to overtake the facts. So they're saying that's not enough. If you're not really racist, you're unconsciously racist. If you're not unconsciously racist, you're a white supremacist. These structural inequalities are all down to race. And you're just going, no. That's not true. That may be how you feel, and that may be the narrative, but it isn't the truth. And what we need to, again, teach children is the truth and personal. Back to that, Mark, remember my point, is that kids, the way to make kids feel, give kids self-esteem, and one of the things I'm really looking at the moment is to have running alongside their education, their responsibilities and their contributions to their society. So what I would call a national contribution, that when they finish GCSE schooling, that they spend a couple of weeks of that summer holiday that they're really looking forward to because they've worked so hard, going and doing something, contributing to our nation in whatever way that is, be it through an apprenticeship or learning something or going working in a factory. And then when they finish school at the end, spending a longer period doing exactly the same thing, so that they know that they are working towards maintaining and building and progressing society, so that as they then become those that are going to create the next generation, they're passing on, as Reagan said, passing freedom on rather than having it destroyed.
Thank you for watching this episode. We appreciate your support. If you value vital conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel there and also click the notification bell to stay up to date with new releases.